Hello, and welcome back to this exciting new video on my channel. My name is Leia, and today we will talk about some books that I will get rid of. Yeah, so I collected 15 books that I want to unhaul, and I've collected these, I think, over these last 7 months. So yeah, it takes me some time to unhaul a decent amount of books to make a video out of, but here we are. So let's get through all of these. I have 2 stacks, which means that there are 2 reasons behind getting rid of these books. We will start with the easy part. The books in the front are all books that I have duplicate copies of, and I just don't need these specific editions. And then the ones in the back are books that I have read, but I didn't enjoy them enough to keep them in my library. So starting with the duplicate copies, here's Carrie by Stephen King. This is the edition that I read it the first time, and I just do not need this teeny tiny paperback edition anymore, because I have a nice hardcover which is an anniversary edition and it looks just much nicer, so bye bye. Next up is this German edition of the first book in the Lies of Locke Lamora series, and again I have the beautiful broken binding edition now, so I do not need a translation and I do not need a plain paperback of it, and the broken binding has the same cover and a lot of nice beautiful additional things, so yeah, do not need that anymore. Then I have these 2 books from the Throne of Glass universe. Again, I have nice new copies that match. I only had the first 4 books in the series with these covers, and it's hard to get them, and I prefer the new ones, which are more abstract with landscapes on it. But I do like these covers as well. They are not bad at all. I just wanted a matching set, and I do not love the series enough to have it twice. It's just way too much space for other books that would get lost, so yeah, do not need those, but I'm sure someone will be happy to get them. And the last 2 books in this stack are the first 2 books in the Unhaul trilogy by Hilary Mantel, which is all about the Tudors and our main character Thomas Cromwell. And yes, again, I do have much more beautiful editions now, which are also in English and not a translated version. And yeah, I got the Folio Society editions, yes. Spent a lot of money, but it is one of my favorite series, so I just had to get them, and yeah, could finally replace these ugly German copies, in my opinion at least. Now on to the hard part. Well, these are some books that I've read recently, and yes, as you can see, there are some special editions as well, which are very, very popular on BookTube. But not everyone can enjoy the same books, so I hope you will forgive me for not loving them. The first one is Elatsue by Darcy Little Badger, and I'm very, very upset about not enjoying it as much as I wanted it to enjoy. But yeah, it's just not for me. I was expecting more fantasy than it was, so yeah, I just didn't vibe with it, and it's so sad because I love the cover. It is absolutely beautiful. I have no idea how I'm going to get rid of it, but I have to. I will never reread it, and there's sure to be someone out there who will enjoy the story, so I would rather someone have it and enjoy it than me keeping it just because of the cover. So yeah, there's that. It's a nice little middle grade story, but too contemporary for my taste, unfortunately. But it's so pretty. Let's look at it one last time. I love it. Now for the next one, it's been a while since I've read it, a few years, I think. But I was going through my shelves because I just I'm running out of space to put my read books on the shelves, so I had to put some of them out of there, and this is one of them. I rated it very highly. I guess I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars when I read it, but I can't recall a single thing. Like, I couldn't even tell you one sentence about this book. Nothing. I've no idea. So I think that's a sign for me to get rid of it, just because, I don't know, I don't think I'll ever read it again. I'm very much interested in other books by the author, but I just do not need to keep this particular book. This next one, Threads That Bind, is very rude. No, now I have the Fairy Loot edition as well, so technically it's a duplicate edition that I just wanted to get rid of, since the covers are very similar and this is just a tiny paperback and so on. But after reading the Fairy Loot edition, I decided to also get rid of that. So this will come later, but yeah, again, it's such a beautiful cover, maybe even more beautiful than Latsue. Like, this is so pretty. I love everything about it. But if the content isn't for me, and I will never reread it, and I'm not even interested in continuing the series, there's no point in keeping it, is there? It's just hard to get rid of special editions, but I think I have to in that case. Yeah, unfortunately. I was so excited to reading it because it was about mythology, not even one particular. I mean, the focus is on Greek mythology, but there's also a little bit of other mythology in there, and I loved that aspect about it, and all the magic that was explained in there. I love the magic system, but the characters, no. I didn't even like one single character in there, and I didn't like the plot at all, and wasn't invested at all, so I don't know. It's a shame. I'm definitely interested in other books by the author, but I mean, if the premise sounds more interesting than the plot and the characters in the end, I don't know if that's a good idea. But yeah, it wasn't a bad book, but couldn't entertain me personally. Next up is a manga, and this is also a first in a rather long series, I believe, and it's basically a crime novel, which is rarely something that I enjoy, but it's also horror, I would say. It's very mild horror, but it's in there. I was actually confused a lot of the times, like maybe the pace was too fast, or some things weren't explained in enough detail for me. But yeah, I was left confused at sometimes with all the relationships between these characters, and also the psychological aspect, like our detective is suffering from multiple personalities, and I like that idea, but I was again quite confused about how it was presented in here. Like, I was missing some backstory or something. But yeah, the actual detective stuff was quite interesting. There are different cases in here, it's not just one, and they were very interesting. There was one about flowers that are blooming inside of people. Yeah, so you see where the horror comes in, yes. And then another case that was interesting was about this suicidal cult. That was also cool. But it's a very, very short time that is taken up by these cases. It's also more about just the detective and his background somehow, and the relationships between these weird people, and something grander going on behind the scenes. I don't know. It was okay for sure. I didn't have anything against it. I think I gave it like 3 stars out of 5. But again, I'm not interested in continuing the series, and just because of these 2 very cool moments, I'm not going to keep it. But if it sounds interesting to you and you like more action-packed crime stuff, maybe this is for you. Okay, now we've got Little Fires Everywhere by Celestine, and this is again a book that I just got rid of when I scoured all my shelves to find some space. It's a book that I've read even longer ago than the other one. Should have been at the start of my college years, so prior to 2020. That's all I know. Maybe in 2017 or something like that. And it was one of the first books that I bought in English and read. So maybe it was just too early to get into this very literary fiction style book, but as I know my taste now, I'm not the biggest fan of literary fiction in general, so this might just not have been for me. I'm also not interested in watching the adaptation, so I think this was just not my story. It sounded more like a thriller, but again, it was more of a character-driven literary book. And I'm usually quite bored when reading stuff like that. I need a good plot to keep me going. But yeah, again, it's such a beautiful cover. It's one of the reasons why I bought it in the beginning, and because it was quite hyped at the time. But yeah, I don't need it anymore, and I hope someone else will enjoy it. The same goes for A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Read it because everyone loved it, but it is character-driven literary book, and the only interesting part was the stuff about art, all the galleries that were looked at, and one of the characters is the artist. It was nice to follow him, how he does his artwork and so on, but other than that, I was not a fan. And yes, it was emotional, for sure. I did cry, so it's not a bad book. It did its thing, but it's way too long. I will never ever reread it to get through the more dragging parts. And I mean, I know what happens now, so I don't know if it's even interesting in the latter half of the book for me now. So yeah, I know it's a very beloved book, but I just didn't really like it. I am interested in Hanya Yanagihara's other books for some reason, like the one about the trees sounds quite interesting, and then the one To Paradise, I think it's called, that sounds amazing, because it's historical fiction and also science fiction, and I love that kind of stuff. It sounds quite similar to Cloud Atlas, just in style, not in plot at all, but we have different time periods, and it just sounds super interesting, so maybe that is more of my style compared to literary contemporary stuff. Okay, and these last 3 books are all fairy-loot books that I've read. I think these are also YA fairy-loot books, so that's a bad sign. I hope I enjoy the YA books that they pick more in the future. So again, this is not a bad book, but I didn't like the romance in it. It was way too cheesy for me, and kind of inappropriate in this very dangerous war situation that these characters are in. And again, not interested in reading the sequel, so that's always a sign for me that I didn't really enjoy the book. I don't want to know how it continues. So again, it's one of the most beautiful covers, isn't it? So it's very hard to get rid of it, but I have to. I can't keep every book that I buy, unfortunately. And I did really love the beginning. I thought this would be a new favorite, because I loved the vibes when our main characters were still rivals, working at this newspaper office, whatever. That was super cool. I love that. Loved the interactions, loved to learn more about the job, and liked the characters very much. But then once we get to the war front, I suddenly didn't like anything anymore. So I don't know. I'm definitely interested in other books by the author, and I hope this was just a singular case of me not enjoying their books, but who knows. Again, I can't enjoy every single book, and these are just a few books over the span of months that I do not want to keep in my shelves. So yeah, it's very hard for me to even decide to unhaul something, because I'm pretty generous and I generally like everything I read. But yeah, some books just aren't for me. Next up, The Foxglove King, and this is the only book from this stack where I am considering keeping it, but I won't. But it's the best book out of them all. I did enjoy it for sure, and I would be interested in finding out what happens next, but not enough to actually read it. But yeah, that's a confusing thing to say. Maybe it makes sense to some of you. I don't know. Again, I did enjoy it. I love the vibes, I love the world, and also the plot. The problem for me was, again, the romance and the characters, but the plot was good, so that's something that I really enjoyed. It was very dark. I was hoping that it would be dark because of the way the cover looks, but for it being a fairy loot pick, they usually are not that dark, but this one was, so that was cool. Very cool magic system again, and the descriptions of the places where the characters are were also very, very cool. So yeah, really like the writing styles, just the characters and the romance stuff that I wasn't vibing with as much, so I'm definitely going to read other books by the author. And the last book, as I mentioned earlier, is Threads That Bind by Fairy Loot, and yeah, this must be the favorite copy that they've done so far, so it's such a shame that I didn't really like it. I don't want to get rid of it, I really do not want to. It's just so pretty. I don't know what to do. Maybe I'll keep it just for a few months longer and then see what I'll decide. And I do not want to just keep the cover and get rid of the book itself, because that's also quite stupid. Like, the person who wants to read this book would be sad if there's no dust jacket, so yeah. So there we have it. These are all the 15 books that will leave my precious library, and I will try to find people who will want to get them. Maybe I'll sell some of these special editions, but other than that I'll give them for free, just because I do not want to get money for these used copies. Like, after reading books once, they are immediately secondhand. I do not keep them in pristine condition. So yeah, that's the video. I hope you weren't too upset with what I chose. Can't love every book, I'm sorry. I want to, of course, I want to love every single book that I pick up, but sometimes you just think that they are okay. There's not a single 1-star book in here, I think. These were all just okay or good but not good enough, but nothing that was absolutely treacherous or something like that. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. Maybe it inspires you to also unhaul some books, and I will see you in my next video. So until then, happy reading and take care. Bye.